But right now, I'm really excited to introduce Nicholas Gruen, who's CEO of Lateral Economics. So Nicholas will be sharing how the coronavirus has really sort of exposed the necessity for adaptive thinking, for a focus on effectiveness and not just efficiency. Often a pragmatic sort of perspective of where the practical might be the best response until proven dangerous. Nicholas will lead us today on his keynote, Thinking, Keep It Adaptive Stupid. This will be a great crescendo from Chiara to Jason to Nicholas Gruen. Welcome to Nudgestock, Nicholas.
Thanks very much, Sam. So let's get straight to it. This is a slide that I show people to emphasize something which I think a lot of people don't appreciate, which is that although they might think that this expertise that they've learnt at university is about 80% of their job and 20% of it is adapting it to circumstances and executing, I'd suggest it's the other way around. Here's something that Nassim Nicholas Taleb and Yanir Bar-Yam, you're familiar, I expect, with Taleb, the author of The Black Swan. Yanir Bar-Yam is a pioneer of complexity science. And this is what they said about the British government's modelling and modelling in handling the coronavirus. The government relied at all stages on epidemiological models that were designed to show us roughly what happens given pre-selected parameters and choices. What could possibly be wrong with that? Well, something that I guess was right about it was that it did enable some people with the mantle of science to say, hey, this is serious. We could have an awful lot of deaths from this coronavirus. We really need to start taking it more seriously. But there's something else going on that I want to draw your attention to. And it is, if you like, you can think of this idea of a hierarchy of knowledge. And there you've got a particular hierarchy of sciences. The harder they are, the less ambiguous they are, in some ways the less complex they are, the higher they are on the hierarchy. And the great temptation there is the temptation to what I call the God's eye view. Because one of the things that happens, here's another God's eye view from the Middle Ages, and one of the things that happens is that the higher on that hierarchy you get, often the more status we give you, the more we treat you like God. But in fact, we are not gods. And here's a non-God. I'm sure he's a god in the film world, but here's somebody, a human being, who's trying to get a God's eye view. And sometimes you just end up looking ridiculous. Here's a hierarchy, and this is a hierarchy from epidemiology. And this is where things start to go badly wrong. Because we get taught at university that if you look at the purple band, that randomized controlled trials are a certain kind of gold standard of evidence. And above that, there are systematic reviews of randomized trials and even meta-analyses of randomized trials and other methods. Well, what could be wrong with that? Well, what could be wrong with it is that that's all wrong unless you add the magic words, other things being equal. And even if you do add the magic words, other things are never equal. So we leave people who have a lot of expertise in this difficult area where they've been taught that certain things are better than certain other things, but then we just leave it up to their common sense for them to work out how much it matters that other things are not equal. And there's been a bit of a war on in epidemiology about whether we can accept evidence if it hasn't been peer reviewed, if it doesn't come out of a randomized controlled trial, and so on. And what the epidemiology, what the modeling should have focused on wasn't a God's eye view, but our eye view. And our eye view needs to focus on our choices, our knowledge, what knowledge we have, and our ignorance, and the priorities we need to give ourselves to work out what are the things we need to know most that we don't know. And I also just want to quickly mention that science isn't everything. There's another kind of knowledge, and that's professional knowledge. Science is for knowing, as a fancy Greek word, to tell you so. Professions are for doing. That Greek word phronesis means practical wisdom. And here we have the practical wisdom of the ancient Egyptians, who knew that the bark of willow trees helped to alleviate symptoms. They didn't know why, they didn't know how, they just knew that it worked, and they knew that it was pretty safe, and so they used it. And these are some professions that I'm showing you now. These are all professions that are for doing. And in my opinion, economics should be there, but it has pretensions to being a science. Now, of course, professions use scientific knowledge. No one's suggesting that they use anything else. No one's suggesting that they don't try to meet the world where it is. But the purpose of that knowledge isn't for God, it's for us, and it's to enable us to prosecute human purposes. And often that gets missed in the public discussion. So let's take an example. Let's take two examples. It's someone in your neighborhood is going to have a thermometer that looks roughly like that, and if they don't, there's no longer a run on them at the pharmacy and the chemist. You can go and buy one. And face masks, low-tech, commonsensical things that would enable us to manage the virus better. Let's have a look at how the profession of epidemiology, the profession of science, the profession of medicine dealt with that. It's had hundreds of drug trials, 145 of hydroxychloroquine, which is kind of ridiculous, without connecting them up properly. It's had scores of vaccine trials. I guess there's a good tick for that. We all want a vaccine. But now look, there have been 2 trials of masks, none examining social distancing, none looking at the quarantining effect. And often one of the most fundamental things, which this audience will certainly appreciate, is getting people to do what we say we should get them to do. That's a critical thing, but that's not high status. That doesn't get you a great academic career or even a professional career often. Here's a friend of mine. His name is Jeremy Howard. I got to know him when I was the first chair of a company called Kaggle, which subsequently was bought by Google. And he was the chief data scientist, an amazing guy. And quite a long time ago, Jeremy's a very smart guy, but he's no epidemiologist. But common sense said to him, surely masks ought to be an important part of this. And he did some reading, and he confirmed for himself that masks were indeed very important. And he started Masks for All and has saved tens of thousands of lives with this global movement and the global hashtag. Please hashtag it, tweet it now, do me a favor if you would. And now I'm going to ask Peter to play a video, which is an edited version of what you'll find on the Masks for All website.
We have an important message for all of you, especially if you live in a country that is right now facing the new coronavirus. The pandemic is growing exponentially in many countries. But the Czech Republic is one of the few in Europe that has significantly slowed down the spread of the virus. In this video, we would like to tell you what we did differently, and mainly, we would like to help you to do the same. We are following social distancing and the rules stay at home. But others do that too. We also have strict hygienic procedures. Others do that as well. But the main difference is Everyone who has to leave their house has to wear a face mask. Everyone. I know, they may be told you that masks wouldn't protect you, but there are studies proving that even a homemade mask can be partially protective. Partially. Any protection is essential today. But now the more important thing. Masks fundamentally prevent the transmission from you to others by sneezing, coughing, but also breathing. And many people are the most contagious before they start showing symptoms. So, when we both have a face mask, I protect you, you protect me, and we are both safe. Just a few days ago, people were laughing at those who wore masks. But some people knew about this positive effect and started to share this information across social media. The message grew fast through artists, influencers, and others. I know, face masks aren't in stores, right? But something incredible happened. People started making homemade masks and giving them to others for free. Many companies, theaters, or even retirement houses changed their buildings into sewing rooms, and thousands of people started to sew masks at home. So we know that face masks work, and it has been repeatedly confirmed by scientists. We know that it is possible in just 3 days to provide face masks for 10 million people in one country. And we know that here we have fundamentally repressed the infection. Please share this knowledge and help us to change as many countries as possible. Take a picture with your face mask on and share it with the hashtag #MasksForAll. It can really save lives. And remember, I protect you, you protect me.
Okay, so there you could see a very different approach to thinking our way through and addressing the practical circumstances of the COVID crisis. I'll put on the screen, you can look in the recording later, what is on the Masks for All website, and just look at how different what's there is to the scientific stuff and to the medical stuff. For instance, cloth masks can be washed in soapy water and reused. A very different world of practical action on that website, which has saved tens of thousands of lives. And now I want to play a second, shorter video of what's going on in China. I can't tell you whether the government mandates this, but it doesn't matter because we could be improvising something like this. And how many of us are doing this when we open up schools? Please run the video.
花就开了，幸福里感受，什么都别说，所有美好的时光渐渐地飘落，一起看四季变换，爱你如踪。我们走着走着，花就开了，在清风秋月里望眼着生活，爱你就像一杯茶，情似一团火，平平淡淡和你守着那执着。
So I want to finally now just take you through some of the conclusions I would like to suggest that you might draw from this. What can we do? What should we be doing differently? The first thing I want to say is a big thing, which is we should change the way we educate people, always and everywhere, which is that expert training shouldn't just be teaching people what experts know. It should be teaching people what experts don't know. And we heard from Jason Collins something about something that Daniel Kahneman said some time ago, which didn't stand the test of time all that well. And something else that struck me when I was looking at Daniel Kahneman's work recently is that he said that all professionals suffer from overconfidence. Can I tell you that that's not true? If we train professionals not to be overconfident, they're not overconfident. If you train an engineer properly, he can tell you exactly, or she can tell you exactly the tolerances that they're building to. And weather forecasters, every forecast is a forecast of what they know, 60% chance of rain, and what they don't know, a 40% chance that whatever they say is the highest probability is going to turn out to be wrong. Another thing is we talk about what works, and then we think that that can be worked out by people who don't do what works. So if we've got a what works center for education, then let's find people, actual people who do things that do work. Let's promote them rather than just turn up and try and suck the knowledge out of what they've done and present it as science, because knowledge is embodied in practice. Challenge systems with common sense, change rules into presumptions. One of the terrible things in most countries is that we should have been using masks all along. That's what Jeremy Howard was arguing all along, and now everyone has come around. Can you imagine how much less destructive this crisis would have been had we done that? But what happened was, in one country after another, the chief medical officer said, oh, well, the WHO, the World Health Organization, hasn't recommended it, so we won't use our common sense. So finally then, it would be easy to say, oh, well, this is adaptive thinking for the crisis. And I want to tell you that it's actually, we always need to keep it adaptive. And I want to tell you about my own experience, which were back over 20 years ago when I found blood in my urine. And I went to, and I rang the doctor and I asked the doctor the doctor indicated to me that I should have a cystoscopy for my bladder and an ultrasound to look at my kidneys to see if there was any cancer there. I couldn't, the cystoscopy, of course, is a quite an invasive exercise. They put you under a general anesthetic, and it's therefore not something to be done lightly. The ultrasound is extremely harmless. I could only get the ultrasound on Friday, and I awaited my cystoscopy on the Tuesday. At the ultrasound, I said to the guy, I've been under a lot of stress lately. I'm rather worried. Would you mind, after you've checked my kidneys, if you could look at my bladder? He checked my bladder. He said, you don't have cancer. You don't have, there's nothing I could see wrong with your bladder. I said to him, surely you mean I might have cancer, but it doesn't look like it. He said, no, I can be confident you don't have cancer. The person you're looking at on the screen on my last slide is a person who died of bladder cancer. I know what happened. He's my father. And he was riding his motorbike on his farm and he fell off it and there was blood in his urine, and he and the doctor decided it probably wasn't worth him at 75 having a cystoscopy. And my father was an optimistic kind of guy. And so that's what happened. And 4 months later, he was diagnosed again from the same condition. But what could have happened is we could have known what was going on 4 months earlier if we just kept it adaptive. Stupid. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nicholas. Insofar as being adaptive, it looks like you nailed that straight to time.
I did. I should have turned my buzzer off, but there you are.
What a great discussion. I think changing rules into presumptions, just such powerful language, and certainly as an organization that looks to embrace some of the knowledge and theory that psychology gives us to be adaptive and creative with those solutions. I think the setup you provide of sort of, we tend to bring 80% knowledge and 20% adaptability should be flipped is an extremely powerful one.
Can I just interrupt to say that,
Please.
but we don't want psychologists telling doctors to do that. We want doctors trained to be able to use their expertise with common sense rather than just to read off lists. Anyway, you go on with your question.
No, but that's, well, then I might skip question for a moment, because there's a nice question that's popped up on Slido. So if you'd like to submit a question, please go to Slido, hashtag Nudgestock 2020. Let me just try and find it. Essentially, the question was regarding a lot of the behavioral interventions like distancing and like wearing masks can be tough for epidemiologists to conduct RCTs on these sorts of interventions. Wondering, I mean, that feels like it's a fact. Wondering ways in which we can start to make ourselves feel comfortable in implementing these solutions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of things that we're going to do better next time. That's cold comfort, but there's going to be a lot of things we're going to do better next time. And it's pretty obvious. Let's hope it happens. It hasn't really happened with economics much, but let's hope that chief medical officers have behavioral people around, have this broad practical knowledge to say, because do you remember how we were told that there would be lockdown fatigue? Well, people were just making that stuff up. That was just confirmation bias, because various people were afraid of asking the population to lock down for a long time. So it is possible to do a lot more short-term experimentation, scanning of similar situations, and so on. So I think there's, I think that we will do better, but we need to build it in rather than just build over a kind of behavioural layer, I think.
As you say, and I think there was a similar question posed to Chiara earlier in the session around sort of hard science and behavioural interventions, and Chiara's resounding response was it's neither, it's both.
Absolutely.
And embracing what we don't know, and an area you
well,
touched.
but it is science for purpose. It's not the other way around. You can leave up to the astronomers. They can just have science for science sake, but it's science for purpose for all this stuff. It's science to be brought into a professional, purposive context.
As you say, rules into presumptions, direction into hypotheses, and to be as focused on the 80% that we don't know as the 20% that we think that we do. And a last piece just on, you touched on this, but maybe the role of education, and whether there's, universities don't teach us what we don't know.
Absolutely, they don't. And so there are plenty of opportunities. I mean, for instance, you can take people through forecasting competitions. People can discover how much they don't know, how little their expertise adds. I don't need to mention Philip Tetlock's name to this audience, I'm sure, but that can be tremendously useful. And Philip Tetlock has a list of qualities of a super forecaster. They are ethical qualities. They are curiosity, respect for others, attempting not to be overconfident. So we could think about some of that for our education as well. It's not all technical.
Nicholas Gruen, thank you so much for joining us at Nudgestock 2020. It's been a thrill to work with you on this.
Thanks very much, Sam.
Thanks so much.